Hi, my name is Amy Ricker, and this is my presentation on tort liability. Tort liability is defined as a legal term describing a violation where one person causes damage, injury, or harm to another person. The violation may be a result from intentional actions or a breach of duty, as in negligence, or due to a violation of status. The following are some cases in education where tort liability was tried. The first case is Mitchell versus Cedar Rapids Community School District. In the fall of 2007, a 14-year-old student, 9th grade student who's in special education, failed to show up to class one day. She is a student that has an individual education plan that was developed by the team and her mother, and it revealed that she had no behavioral considerations, that she was capable of independently forming daily living skills except for money management. The student is rarely, if ever, without direct supervision, however, and due to her diminished capacity, and the trial record showed that this was not mentioned in the IEP. We have a 19-year-old male student who's also another special education student there at the school, and the classroom teacher had witnessed both these two students spending quite a bit of time together that fall and observed them engaging in some physical contact, mainly including kissing. She assumed that the relationship between these two students was age appropriate, and she didn't recall any signs that the younger student did not wish to be interacting with this older student. The teacher did indicate to a general concern that if any of her students she thought in relationships might engage in sexual activity, she usually had conversations with them and their parents and things like that. On the day of the actual occurrence, both students skipped fifth hour and left the school grounds and went to the young man's home. Then from there, they went to another friend's home where they engaged in sexual activity in the garage. They had sexual intercourse. So in November 2009, the mother, Mrs. Mitchell, she sued the school for negligence on her daughter's behalf, alleging that Kennedy had breached of duty. They hadn't taken care of her daughter. They had failed to supervise her daughter, failed to notify her when she was absent from school. They didn't monitor the attendance properly. They did not go through their procedures. And where she was a special education student, they felt like, mom felt like that the system for monitoring special education students hadn't been followed. So the reactive measure, I would have sat down and visited with the teachers involved and got all the specific information, gathered that all up, visited with everybody, reviewed the IEP. Proactive measures, have a clear and consistent policy for unexcused absences. Make sure that students are accounted for. If they're not there, that you're following your policy. So your professional ethics is to ensure that all staff is aware of the policy and how to go about, if a child is missing, how to go about the proper channels of taking care of that. My next case is Frame versus Comex. Comex is a substitute teacher, and she is giving a test in the science classroom by the request of the original teacher. Comex is administering the spelling test, and students are being very disruptive in the class. After she gets onto the kids that are offending the students and asks them to leave, they leave, the ones that were disruptive. Shortly after that, Casey Frame speaks out during the test and makes some noise, so the substitute asks Casey to also leave the classroom twice, and Casey does not leave. So the substitute approaches Casey's desk, where he proceeds to respond slowly by standing up to face the substitute teacher. Simultaneously, the substitute grabs Casey by the arm to assist him out of room. Combined actions threw Casey off balance and caused him to stumble backwards down the aisle, where he hit the podium and eventually came to a halt against the blackboard. Casey was then removed from the classroom. Casey's family filed a suit alleging that the substitute's actions consisted as an assault and battery, and argued that the substitute attacked him and that his attack was unprovoked. So even if provoked, Casey argued that actions were excessive in light of the situation. The court found that the substitute committed a battery. He was justified in doing so. Casey's actions were apparently sufficient enough to provoke the substitute teacher forcibly to remove him from classroom. And the court also found it was necessary for the substitute to remove Casey from the classroom, not only to maintain order, but also to facilitate a learning environment. So reactive measures, the substitute teacher would have not been allowed back into the district until investigation, some things were checked out. And proactive measures would be that we are making sure that we provide proper training for all substitutes before they can work in a district, making sure they understand how you work with students who have issues, behavioral issues, outbursts, just even your general ed students, how to deal with those challenging students. Your ethics, as an educator, we've got to provide a safe environment for all of our stakeholders throughout trainings and policies. Flanagan versus Canton. This is a case where Brendan is a 5th grade student, and he's at Canton Middle School. Flanagan was participating in the gym class on this particular day. The teacher noticed that students were getting pretty rowdy in the classroom. So the PE teacher, normally the last 4 or 5 minutes of the class was set aside for students to go change, and that's monitored. As a result, the teacher stopped class a little bit early and lectured the students about the importance of being on task, paying attention, not horsing around, goofing around, and sent the kids to go change. She held back a couple of students from the locker room because they needed to be addressed a little bit more. So that left the locker room unattended. Flanagan and his peers were in the locker room when another student pushed Flanagan, and he sustained severe personal injuries and resulted in an emergency surgery. Although the education teacher normally accompanies those students into the locker room, she had remained in the, for about 3 to 4 minutes, so they were unattended. So the parents sued the school district for negligence of supervision. The court recognized that although the school has a duty to adequately supervise its students, it's not an insurer for all the little things that might happen. So the court pointed out that the school is only liable for foreseeable injuries, meaning things that they can foresee going to happen. So the reactive measure is students would not have been allowed to have gone into the locker room without another adult present. I would have had, have your students just wait while you talk to the other two privately over to the side and then dismissed into the locker rooms. Proactive measures ensure that you have adequate coverage for locker rooms before and after classes through use of other staff in the district, or, like I said, keeping the rest of them out there in the gym area while you're addressing issues. Always err on the side of caution and try to prevent those foreseeable situations. Try to think ahead. Practic versus Millard School District. In this case, Darlene Practic brought a wrongful death action against the school when her son David died following an accident in a PE class. David was a 9th grade student at 14 at the time and was injured in 1974 during PE class. He was struck by a golf club that was swung by a fellow student. He was rendered unconscious and died approximately 2 days later after the incident. At the time of the accident, mandatory golf instruction classes were being conducted in the gym due to inclement weather. David's class consisted of 34 boys and 24 girls, supervised by 2 teachers. On the first day of classes, students were instructed regarding the proper procedures and like how to hold the golf club, how to swing it, etiquette, safety, things like that. David was absent on that first day, so when he was back on the second day, he had missed out on those things. And even though the school has written rules and things like that, there wasn't a going over those rules. So when it was David's turn to get up and golf, he wasn't sure what to do. He asked for help. Another student helped him. And when David went to, the student went to use the clubs, he didn't realize the other student was close to him. So Reactive measures, a review of previous taught lessons should have occurred to make sure for a refresher of everyone's memory on the rules, even if it was just yesterday, and that's safety and to catch up on those who have missed your class. Proactive measure, teachers must be observant of the entire class, even if you have additional adults helping or teaching. This particular teacher had a student teacher, but it's not the student teacher's job to oversee the whole class. So professional ethics, rules, and policies must be reviewed and maintained to ensure safety for all stakeholders involved in an activity. My last case is Harris, and McCray. Mr. Harris was a 15-year-old student enrolled in Jefferson County High School. He alleges that he suffered a heat stroke while participating in a scheduled football practice. The football practice was scheduled and conducted by Coach McCray in his capacity as head football coach. As head football coach, Coach McCray had the discretion to determine if the time of practice would be conducted and the nature of the practice, including the timing of breaks, cancellation of practice, all those things, taking in consideration heat and things like that. At all times, Coach McCray was acting within his course of his scope of employment and as an employee of the school district. The trial court decided that Harris had suffered damages in the amount of $3,500,000 and as a result of the school district's negligence. However, the trial court did conclude that the school district was immune from liability under the Mississippi tort claims. So, reactive measures, review of policies regarding practices during high temperatures, making sure we're aware of those things, we're following those rules. In the state of Kansas, we have to follow the rules set forth by KSHA, and we do have rules regarding those heat practices and things like that to ensure that kids are properly hydrated and you're taking breaks every so many minutes and things like that. And professional ethics, you're ensuring student safety at all times and use of common sense also. These are my references of the sites I used. Thank you for listening.